So like, when you're working for a small business, the deductible also will be very high, and that puts people in a really bad situation. So again, like, especially if you're working for a small business, it's very likely that Medicare plan is going to make more sense. Not even Medicare Advantage or Supplement will make more sense if you're working for a small business. The larger the business, and of course, the more money that they have, they kind of reinvest in the benefits.
Right. Yeah, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that point, because other times, I'll even ask the question, hey, is there a reason that you're taking this specific medication? And a lot of times the answer that we get is, this is just what my doctor prescribed me. And other times you may run into the situation where it's like, well, we've tried other medications and this is the one that makes sense for me, that works best for me.
It's important, again, and this is really what it comes down to, is understanding enrollment periods, understanding when people are allowed to make changes. I think that it's super important, just kind of having a good understanding of how to help people apply for this, and so what we consider basic, but super important. Hey everybody, welcome back to Medicare Agent IQ. I am Raul Gonzalez.
And I'm Oscar Ibieta.
And this is, like we said, Medicare Agent IQ. And the reason that we do this is really we just want to help agents to be more successful selling Medicare. It's the heart of why we do it. So, hey, just a note to share with, if you have a downline team, a lot of times people are like, man, I don't want to send that anywhere. We don't do any recruiting here. It's not something that is a goal of ours. We're here. We're looking to help people be successful.
Yeah. So if you have that downline team and you want to share some information, give them some information for them to kind of put in their knowledge bank, feel free to share it and scroll through all our episodes. We have different topics that we've discussed. We're 51 episodes into this. And so, there's a chance that we've probably discussed something. So if you ever get a question from somebody, from one or a fellow agent, you could say, hey, take a listen to this episode, and there's some information that'll answer some of your questions here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do we got today? So I thought today what we could probably do is just kind of go through some frequently asked questions that we get from agents, that agents kind of see out in the field. And some of these questions I pulled from, I'm on some Facebook groups and then I see, other social media platforms where agents are constantly asking random questions. And I'll be completely honest. So I'm 11 years into this, right? So sometimes I look at some of these questions and I'm like, man, that's like, I remember learning that, before I even got out into the field, and it can be, it's a little bit scary to me. I'm like, gosh, there's some of these agents still have these questions, but
here's why. And the reality is like, we get it all the time. Like when we do recruiting events down, we had a recruiting event recently in the Valley, and this person was already contracted to sell Medicare products. And she was like, tell me about your training. And we explained how we train people. And then she was like, oh man, that's great, because these other people just gave me the books and said, go sell some. And I was like, no, so I understand, I guess everyone has their own standards of
right.
how much they want to train people, but that's why there's that, that varying level of knowledge.
And sometimes that strategy works. You see it a lot in the life insurance industry, because I feel like you really can just get out there and start selling.
Super
when
easy.
It comes to life insurance,
right?
Yeah. But when it comes to Medicare, you can't. You've got to make sure that you've at least spent some time in training and learning the basics and the fundamentals so that you have the ability to get out there and start selling. So what I did was I put together a list of questions, and I figured we'll start out a little bit easy, and then we'll kind of go into some that are a little bit more complicated, and then we'll just go from there and maybe just have a discussion about each one.
So I'll read the question. Does the donut hole reset when someone changes their plan?
So we run into this quite a bit, or you'll see agents that run into this into the field. And the big reason that is because somebody's already entered into the donut hole, right? They're taking multiple tier 3, tier 4 medications, and they've hit that donut hole, and they've seen that $40, $45 copay, whatever it may be. jump, to $100, $200 or more, for multiple medications. And so they're wanting to know, we get these phone calls, can you get me onto a different plan that covers this drug a little bit better because it's too expensive? And so we have to go in and have the conversation about what happens, that they've entered the donut hole and how that works. And so immediately your client might think, well, can I change plans so that way I can save some money? The answer is the donut hole does not reset. So the answer to that question is no. If you change plans during the plan year, that donut hole is not going to reset. So if they're in it and they make a plan change, they're going to remain in that donut hole.
Yeah, and one thing, just kind of a side note to this is in addition to that, I recommend that when you have conversations with customers that you're always mentioning that, obviously, so like when I first started in the business, a donut hole was a real donut hole. Like you would pay 100% of the cost if you were to reach that amount, but it's not such a big deal anymore. But I always tell people, like, hey, look, one of the things you may want to do is talk to your doctors about generic alternatives. And I always tell them, I had a situation once where I don't remember what I was there for, but I went to the doctor and he offered me a prescription, and I said, hey, can I get that in a generic? He's like, no, there's not a generic for that. And I said, wait, actually, there is, and this is what it is. He's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So I'm not going to question his motive. I'm not going to question his motive, especially because this, I think, was before some reform that they did on with pharmaceutical sales. But whatever his motive was, he was wrong, and I shared with him, and he's like, oh yeah, you're absolutely right. So I share that. I would share that with customers all the time and let them know, like, you've got to advocate for your own healthcare. Like, you've got to make sure that this is your money. And so keep in mind that you can ask for generics.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that point, because other times, I'll even ask the question, hey, is there a reason that you're taking this specific medication? And a lot of times the answer that we get is, this is just what my doctor prescribed me. And other times you may run into the situation where it's like, well, we've tried other medications and this is the one that makes sense for me, that works best for me. But sometimes it's not. And so ask that question to your client, is there a reason you're taking this specific medication? And even if there's not a generic alternative, like you mentioned, maybe there's an alternative. Maybe it's another brand name, but it's a brand name drug that costs, half of the one that you're taking now. And so that can help reduce the amount, that 25% that they're paying while they're in the donut hole. That can help bring that down again, and even maybe see if they've got any samples available to get you through. You see this a lot late in the year as well. Members are just trying to get through the year so that Part D can reset for the following plan year. They just need something to get through. So go and have that conversation. Tell your clients to go and have that conversation with their provider.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, so let's move on real quick and just kind of like to follow up with this same question that we get often is, you mentioned that the donut hole does not reset, during during the year if you move from one plan to the other. What about the max out of pocket?
So the max out of pocket for like the hospital and medical benefits, that will reset. So if you move somebody from one carrier to another carrier, that you are going to see that maximum out of pocket reset. And so this is another thing that you've got to make sure that you're doing a thorough needs analysis with your members, and you make sure that they haven't incurred, some high medical bills already, because you will run into people who maybe are pretty close to reaching that max out of pocket, or maybe have already met it. And if you change their plans, you are resetting their benefits back to zero, and now they've got to meet that max out of pocket all over again.
It's dangerous. Like when you've got somebody, and this happens where somebody's dealing with chemotherapy or dealing with things that are actually going to put them toward that max out of pocket. We just got to be cautious of making a move mid-year for that, and it's good to genuinely care for people, and just to kind of even go a step further, if you are dealing with someone who is currently receiving care for something major like cancer, you've got to make sure that all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed when it comes to their health care. What I mean is double check. Everyone's double checking the doctors, right? But like let them know, like if you're going from one HMO to another, you may need to get new referrals. Like you need to jump in front of that. If it's the end of the month, we need to be cautious of that and things like that. So just kind of going in that like kind of a side note, soapbox moment. Like you have to basically, you are responsible for helping them navigate all of that change. Worst case scenario is them getting surprised and they enroll 5 days later, it starts and they're like, oh man, but I have to go get chemotherapy this day, and just kind of messing everything up. So just kind of advocate for them.
Yeah, so just be careful when you're doing that. But at the same time, we're not trying to instill fear in you by any means. We're just saying make sure that you're doing your job and you're holding up on your end and making sure that everything is good to go before they make those changes. But it's usually, I mean, I guess it's safe to say that more times it's usually not the case where they're approaching that max out of pocket when you're running into people outside of, outside of AEP. Usually more times than not, they're not, they haven't incurred a ton of medical bills. So making a plan change still makes sense for them.
Oh yeah. And I would say that the majority of people don't hit the max out of pocket. That's what's great about these Advantage plans. The copays are so low. Yep. So nothing to be afraid of. Hey, another question that pops up a lot is, I have a client move into Tennessee. Should I just go ahead and get my Tennessee license? And that one is hard for me because I always, my answer is like, no, not for one person. Like what I always encourage people to do is like, look, if you have a strategy that you're trying to grow in a state, then absolutely. But if it's just for one client, financially, it doesn't make sense. Really, even for you to go and get the license, and then, it could be that you have an upline as well, and they have to get licensed, and you have to get licensed, and of course your NMA, which most of them are national. They're in all 50 states, but it doesn't always make sense to do it, and to the point where like United Healthcare, if you don't produce in a state, there's like a fee depending on the state. So I would say, like, unless you have a plan to grow in an area, maybe don't get a license for one piece of business. Someone moves, just go and replace them. Spend that energy finding another client to do.
Yeah, or maybe try and find an agent that's out there. Reach out to your upline and see if they maybe have any agents in those states, in those neighboring states, or whatever state it is that your client is moving to. And then see if maybe you can connect with that agent, and then maybe you can build a relationship there and say, hey, look, we're in Texas. If you ever have any clients moving to Texas, I'd love to be the person to take care of them for you as well.
I always see that on like the Facebook groups, of people are like, hey, I have a client that needs face-to-face in Florida, blah, blah, blah. And they'll do it that way. I think it makes a lot of sense to just do that instead of getting a license in every state and then getting all these fees at the end of the year. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So next question is, do I automatically receive my Medicare card when I turn 65?
That's a very basic question.
Yeah.
But I see this question a lot. And the reason that I wanted to talk about it is because, so there are two answers. There's a yes answer and there's a no answer to that. So the answer is yes if a person is already collecting Social Security, or if they were also collecting disability benefits like the SSDI. But of course, if they're on SSDI, they automatically receive that after 2 years. But again, you're turning 65. If you're already collecting Social Security, then you will receive your Medicare card 3 months before you turn 65. When is that answer? No. So the answer is no is if a person is not collecting Social Security. So,
which most people aren't.
Most people aren't. It's
What's
not
the Social
anymore.
Security age now? Like 67?
Gosh, I don't know.
I don't know.
But, well, here's the thing, though. More and more people are working past the age of 65. So what we see more versus when I first got into the business is when I first got into the business, anybody who was turning 65, they already had their Medicare card ready to go, which made life easy for me as an agent. But nowadays, more people are working past the age of 65. And so they, if they're going to opt into Medicare, they have to go through the process of actually applying for Medicare through the website, or they can schedule an appointment with their local Social Security office, or they can call and do it over the phone. But I'd say online is usually the easiest and best way to do it for somebody who's not collecting Social Security. Here's that was a long-winded answer. Though as an agent, if you're talking to somebody who is going to be turning 65, my response usually is, are you already collecting Social Security? And if the answer is yes, then I tell them that they're automatically going to be getting their Social Security card. If the answer is no, then I tell them that they would have to apply for Medicare, and they can do that 3 months before they turn 65, and then offer your services and say, you can do it online, you can do it over the phone, or you can go in person. If we do it online, I'm happy to help you do it, through the computer. It takes all but 10 minutes to knock out that application online. And that's kind of part of my strategy as an agent when I'm out there selling. Our job, I always look at, what we do and our competition, right? Other agents. And I'm thinking, well, if we're all offering the same products, what makes me different? What makes me stand out, compared to other agents? And I'm thinking, well, this is an opportunity. If I'm dealing with somebody who's turning 65, I can say, hey, look, you can go in person, schedule that appointment, but you might have to take, time off of work, and who knows how long that appointment's going to take. You can do it over the phone, but I know that can also take a little long, or you can do it online on the computer. If, and I can help you with that. It would take all of about 10 minutes. Which one would you like to do? And usually the answer is, I'd rather do it online. And so for them, we have to understand, look, this is all brand new, and they probably only have to do this once in their lifetime. For us as agents, we're doing this on a daily basis.
Right.
And so I remind them, look, I know this is all new to you and it could be a little bit intimidating and scary, but I want you to know that I do this every day. And so I can guide you through this entire process and make your life easy for you. So again, it's just an opportunity for me to bring value to myself as an agent and tell my clients, look, let me work for you and let me show you everything that I can do for you through this process.
Yeah. Just a side note, through the end of this year, for people turning 65 in 1959, it's the official retirement age for Social Security. Full retirement is 66 and 10 months. And it is starting for people born in 1960, it'll be 67.
Okay.
So the reason I share that is sometimes that's a question that you'll get from seniors that are retiring, that or wanting to retire. They'll ask you that question. So just a little side note there. So next question here is, I am losing my EGHP. When can I enroll into Medicare?
Yep. So we see this question a lot. Let's assume, I'm going to answer this question assuming that this person is already past the age of 65. So for those who don't know what EGHP is, it's Employer Group Health Coverage. So somebody who's covered.
Is that an accepted acronym?
I see it all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was like, when I saw it, I was
haven't seen this one.
I've been doing this for like 17 years. I'm like, EGHP. Hopefully he explains it.
Employer Group Health Plan.
I figured it out like almost immediately, but I was like, that's not an acronym I've seen before. So, or all the time. So it's funny.
So I'll answer this question again, with the assumption that the person is past the age of 65, meaning they're outside of their IEP, their initial enrollment period. So there is a process to this, and everyone knows that they've got to go and apply for Medicare. They've got to go and enroll into Part B, and they can go into the Social Security office. They can do it online. They can call in. But there's another, in that form, that if you fill out the paper form, it's called the 40B, 40 Bravo, 40B. And that one is the enrollment into Medicare Part B. But there's another form, it's called the L564 form. And basically what this form does is it shows proof of coverage, because remember, there's a penalty in that is for Part B. If you don't enroll into Part B when you first become eligible, there is a penalty for every 12 months that you've gone without Part B coverage. And so, however, you can avoid that penalty if you have creditable coverage through your employer. So again, for the sake of this question that we're addressing here, this person does have creditable coverage through their employer. Now, how do we prove that? How do we prove to Social Security that I've had coverage through my employer, and so that way you can enroll me into Part B without me having to pay this penalty? The proof is this form that I just discussed. It's the L564 form. And so that is just basically a supporting document that shows that you have had health insurance coverage through your employer since at least the time that you became eligible for Medicare. And that's a form that this person has to take to their HR department, and somebody has to sign off on that before you turn that in. So there is a little bit of homework that you have to give your clients when you're helping them go through this process. But again, that's what we do as agents, and it's our job to know this information and to help them through this transition. And so 2 forms, all you've got to do is it's the 40B form and the L564 form, which needs to be signed by their HR department. Once you have those 2 forms, the way that I do things personally is I fax them in to their local Social Security office. So
To their local office?
local office, that's the key word. Thanks for saying that, because the member that you're dealing with, whatever their zip code is, wherever they live, you'd have to go and find the local Social Security office.
How does one find that, Oscar?
Super easy. I just Google. I don't even think I have this page bookmarked, but I just Google find my local Social Security office. And then it takes me to the Social Security website. I plug in the zip code and it tells me the nearest office with their fax number.
Nice.
And so I've got that fax number, and now I take these 2 forms and I fax it in there. So very, very, again, I know there's a lot of information that I shared there, but it's a very easy and seamless process. We do this all the time. All of our agents here do this, and we're able to walk people through this process. But again, operate in the mindset of this is a scary process, a scary transition for our members. It's our job to make them feel warm and safe through this process.
Right. Actually, don't have any other thoughts on that situation. It's important, again, and this is really what it comes down to, is understanding enrollment periods, understanding when people are allowed to make changes. I think that it's super important, just kind of having a good understanding of how to help people apply for this. And so very, what we consider basic, but super important. On the next one is I have insurance. Speaking of enrollment periods, I have insurance through my employer, but my company's open enrollment isn't until December. What are my options?
So we see this a lot, and these are a lot of times I see it as a missed opportunity for agents, because a lot of agents kind of also assume that their members, their prospects, cannot enroll into Medicare until their company's open enrollment period, but that's not true. A person who is working and has coverage through their employer has the ability to apply for Medicare at any month during the year. So if you meet somebody, and here's how it goes, right? When an agent's out in the field and talking to somebody, if you meet someone and they say, well, I'm 68, but I'm still working, so that's why I don't have Medicare. And that's an opportunity for you as the agent to say, well, have you ever taken the time to just kind of do, a comparison and see what it's costing you to have your insurance through your work versus what it would cost you to have your insurance through your Medicare? And that response is usually something like, well, no, because I just thought that because I'm still working that I didn't have to take Medicare. And there's a missed opportunity, because they could be saving so much money on their health plan, and they don't even know it, because they just assumed that because they're still working that they're going to stick with their employer coverage. And so that's where we take that opportunity and say, look, let's sit down and let's do a comparison, and let's say, look, this is what Medicare is going to cost, and these are the options that are available to you: Medicare Advantage, Medicare Supplements. And if it makes more sense for you financially, then we can get you off your group plan now. We don't have to wait until December or really any time of the year, because all we're trying to do is get you onto Medicare, and we can go ahead and get you off of that plan now.
Yeah, I would say that, whether or not people are going to do that, I think is every case is different, like every individual. And when it comes to the health insurance, like, gosh, obviously in our company, we have group insurance. So when you're working for a small business, the deductible also will be very high, and that puts people in a really bad situation. So again, especially if you're working for a small business, it's very likely that Medicare plan is going to make more sense. Not even Medicare Advantage or Supplement will make more sense if you're working for a small business. The larger the business, and of course the more money that they have, they kind of reinvest in the benefits. Right. Then obviously there's large employer groups that probably have pretty, or they work for a union, they have pretty good
Right.
health benefits that might make more sense. But that's why you've got to have the conversation and never just make an assumption.
Yeah, and that said, I mean, there's now there are other layers to it, which obviously, you know, we could go and do a whole nother podcast on. You've got to ask the right questions and make sure that it actually makes sense. But just open up the conversation and look at that as an opportunity for you, the agent. And then just a little bonus tip here on the topic of what we're just discussing, this particular question. Go out and find some group agents who write business for small groups, large groups, and see if you can maybe partner with them and talk about getting, you know, those Medicare recipients, Medicare eligibles off of the plans, because it's a win for the business and potentially a win for that employee.
Yeah, and if you are an agency owner looking to recruit agents, also pretty good. So like we have an individual that we were able to recruit that they basically had one of their employees get licensed and appointed to sell Medicare plans, so that way they didn't have to let go of that business. It actually worked out pretty well for them. So if you are a recruiter, that is a good place to go also.
Yep.
So, hey, you know what? I want to go ahead and stop right there. And next week, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to answer about 5 or 6 more questions. But I just wanted to you know, before we move forward on any of our questions, just take the time again to just remind everybody that we are here. Don't hesitate to reach out on YouTube, on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or really any of those places. We are here to help. And so until next time, keep pushing hard.